20 odd years ago, I fell in love with innovation. So I'm just deeply fascinated with the difficult act of actually bringing something new into the world and creating value with it. So that is the perspective I come with when we talk about NFTs and Web3 and blockchain and all that jazz. So for the past 20 years, I've called myself an innovation midwife because I help give birth to new ideas and bring them safely into the world. And I've helped a lot of different companies and organizations do just that. So now when a topic like, or when something like NFTs and blockchains and stuff like that emerges, I become really curious, because when something appears that get the minority of people really excited and the majority of people basically just ignoring it or even laughing at it, then I know there's something interesting happening, potentially interesting. So I think actually that Mahatma Gandhi got it just right when he said, first, they ignore you. And I think blockchains and NFTs and all that stuff has been ignored largely by the public for up until recent years. Then he said, then they laugh at you. Well, people are still laughing, especially at NFTs, right? We'll talk more about that today. Then they fight you. And right now, there's actually a lot of legislative and a lot of legislative battles going on, a lot of regulatory battles going on within the sphere of Web3, especially. So what's the final thing? Well, Mahatma Gandhi said, then you win. So have NFTs won? No, not yet. Should they win? I'm not sure, but let's explore through this agenda. Now, I have a 3-part agenda for you today. The first part is there anything we can learn from history that would inform us to ask the question above? Let's talk about what NFTs actually are, what you can do with them today and tomorrow. And then finally, let's also take a peek into the crystal ball and look at some of the exciting use cases that might be a few years out. Now, I have a disclaimer, another disclaimer. I am a nerd gone soft. It's been many years since I've written any lines of code. So if you have very technical questions, I think you should still ask them, but chances are I might have to direct you to someone else who could answer them. But yeah, go ahead and ask. Just know that I'm kind of an innovation nerd, not so much a technical nerd anymore. Not enough time, I guess. So before we begin in earnest, I want to see a show of hands. Now, raise your hand if it's made of diamonds. No hands. Okay, so this is just a small test to see how many Web3 natives are in here, because having diamond hands in the crypto world means that you hold on, you hodl your assets, no matter how the market goes, even if it plunges, right? If the market crashes. So that might end up looking something like this, right? Now, another show of hands. How many of you know what an NFT is? Oh, more than half of you. Okay. How many of you own at least one NFT? There are quite a few people in here. Okay, good. So thank you for satisfying my curiosity. One final question, though. Raise your hand if you're good at predicting the potential value of a new breakthrough, a new discovery, a new invention. One hand. Did I just saw one hand? That's very modest. I think most of us, if you could answer this anonymously, you might be less modest. I think it's like all male drivers. The majority of male drivers say that they're better than average at driving a car, right? So, well, if there's anything we've learned from innovation history, it is that we are terrible at predicting the potential value of a breakthrough. And I think we have a perfect, relatively fresh example of this. It's called the internet. So let's take a closer look at the internet from a historical perspective. Like in the late 90s, most people said that the internet was just a fad. I don't know if you remember, if you're old enough to remember. In the early 2000s, most people said you can't make money off the internet. That's pretty recent history, right? So we basically suck at predicting potential. And I think there's so many things going on in the Web3 NFT space in this era that are analogous to what happened in the early internet days. So that's why we would do well to take a look at that. I just forgot this, right? I'm giving a talk on NFTs, and sometimes I get confused as well what it is. So don't feel bad if you don't know what it is. Hopefully you'll know in a half an hour's time. Okay, let's look at that internet history, shall we? So there are a million rabbit holes I could go down here, but I'm just going to focus on a few things. Now, the internet, the World Wide Web as we know it, started out about 1993. The main characteristic was that it was read-only, right? So basically, it was a digital version of a newspaper or a magazine or a diary or whatnot. So the only thing that really separated it from what we had before was this magical thing called hyperlinks, right? That tied everything together in this wonderfully messy and adventurous way at the same time that our linear minds was both frustrated and fascinated with. Okay, turn the clock forward. Web 2.0 started about 2004, that's debatable, was characterized by being read-write. So now you could actually contribute to not just your own little walled garden on the internet, but actually contribute and add to other people's content and what they put out there. So very long story short, social media was born, right? And maybe around 2018, Web3 as a concept finally caught on. The term was coined by the co-founder of Ethereum called Gavin Wood, now founder of Polkadot. And Web3 is the internet based on blockchains. It doesn't necessarily have to be, if you ask Gavin Wood, but that's the way we kind of see it today. And the main thing about Web3 that sets it apart from Web2 is that now it's read, write, own. That's the big difference. Mm-hmm. So contrast that to Web2, where you don't actually own most of the content you put up there. You're kind of at the mercy of a few tech giants. If you are a YouTuber, if you make your living from YouTube, for instance, YouTube can pull the rug out from under you, and they don't even have to explain why. So Web3, the promise of Web3 is where we, the users, take back the internet. That is the big idea here. And that's why I think it's worth pursuing. Now, originally, one of the main thoughts behind the internet was that it was decentralized. And even then, organizations tried to centralize it, right? Take something like AOL, for instance, that tried to create walled gardens on the internet. But we weren't having it. The users wanted the full experience back in the day. So none of them really succeeded until we reached Web 2.0, which is basically centralized. So we've exchanged decentralization for a bit of convenience and some funny cat videos. I'm of course joking a bit, but there is some truth to that, right? We've given up on decentralization, basically, as internet users. Now, with Web3, we want to bring decentralization back. And you can argue whether or not that's always a good thing, but it seems like historically it tends to go decentralized, centralized, decentralized, and maybe that's okay. Now, final thing I will mention about Web 1.0 is that money actually weren't allowed on the internet back in the day. And some call this the original sin because that forced us to come up with new ways to monetize what we did on the internet. So enter Google, enter advertising on steroids, right? And now we're the product. So I think it's worth mentioning that one of the reasons that money weren't allowed on the internet was that encryption was illegal. They said that encryption is only for criminals. Why? If you have anything to hide, you must be a criminal. So SSL was illegal. So Netscape Navigator in the beginning was actually classified under the same munitions regulations as Tomahawk cruise missiles. Believe it or not, that's true. So now we have money on the internet, right? And it works pretty well. The problem is that it's a complex setup. It's opaque. And we are at someone else's mercy. So we can only hope that it's someone we can trust, right? Banks are trustworthy? There should be a question mark there. Now with Web3, money comes built in. Everything is transparent. It's a public ledger. And rules aren't easily bent. You have to write new code to create new rules. But we're back here. It's for criminals. How many, you've heard that, right? That narrative? Blockchains is for criminals. Despite the fact that all the studies I've seen show that there is much more illicit activity going on in TradFi or traditional finance than there is on DeFi, decentralized finance, stuff based on blockchain. I actually heard a digital forensics expert say, I wish that all criminals would use blockchains, then we would catch all of them, right? Yeah, so it's not impossible to trace criminals when they use blockchains. On the contrary. Right, so that was just a quick rundown of the instance. So I think there's stuff to be learned here. Now, let's take a look at what an NFT actually is. Let's start out by looking what it isn't. So there's this matrix. Let's look at fungibility. Take a $1 note. It's a tangible thing. You can hold it in your hand. It is fungible, meaning it's interchangeable. You don't really care if you have $1 bill or the other, right? The same thing goes for a Bitcoin, actually. It's intangible, it's digital, but you don't really care if you have one Bitcoin or the other, or Ethereum or whatever. Now, if it's tangible and non-fungible, that would be, for instance, the Mona Lisa. You care very much about if you have the original Mona Lisa or if you have a copy of it, right? And then we get to what we usually consider NFTs, which are something where you care very much about which one you have, and it's intangible. Well, actually, NFTs can be physical, but maybe we can return to that. So that's kind of the rundown. To be more concrete, an NFT is a unique unit of data on a blockchain linked to digital or physical objects to provide an immutable proof of ownership. Now, notice that I say linked to, because most people think you actually own the asset or that it's on the blockchain, but it usually isn't. That's not what an NFT is. So sometimes the asset will be on the blockchain, and maybe we can get into why it isn't today. It's basically too big. That's the story, right? So a blockchain is a piece of data, which is basically a unique identifier, and metadata, which points to where the underlying assets it's stored. It shows something like price history, purchase history, and stuff like that. And it's owned by an address, which is a wallet, a crypto wallet. It typically uses the token standard ERC 721 or ERC 1155 if minted on the Ethereum blockchain, which still most NFTs are today. And being minted basically means tying it to a smart contract. And what is a smart contract? Well, a smart contract is a program that runs when predetermined conditions are met. Smart contracts automate the execution of an agreement so that all participants can be immediately certain of the outcome without any intermediaries' involvement. Yeah, so that's the big thing, right? We take out the middleman. That's what it enables. So that was being pretty specific about what an NFT is. I hope that clarified it for those of you who don't know. Maybe it's still a bit fuzzy, but let's keep expanding on it. Let's talk about what makes an NFT valuable. So I don't know if this has come up. People saying, well, most people connect NFTs with very expensive JPEGs. So can't you just right-click and save and you have the same thing, right? They're identical. Well, not quite. I guess this is the story about why an NFT is valuable and why that isn't quite true. Is basically saying, why is the Mona Lisa valuable? But if that is something that we need to discuss further, let's just ask me a question about it. So because NFTs can be really valuable, a minority of NFTs out there today are very valuable. This is a good example, a Bored Ape. I don't know if you've heard about it. This one sold for about $3.4 million. The floor price for a Bored Ape is $100,000 US today, 80 ETH. Now, I'm going to show you 7 metrics of value for an NFT. The first 3 are pretty trivial, and the last 4 are pretty exciting, I think. So the first one is actually just being first. Now, if you're a collector, before there were anything called NFTs, you would still want to have the first copy of something, right? That made it valuable. That's the same thing with NFTs. You want it to be rare and unique. Yeah, I don't think we need to spend much time on that. Of course, it matters who's owned it before. If your NFT has been owned by a celebrity, say, then it's probably going to be worth more. So those were the trivial ones. Now, identity and belonging, that's kind of, we're diving into the softer values here, right? So if you spend a lot of your life online in the digital world, it matters to you how you're represented. So think about how much money and effort a lot of us spend into how we look, our clothes and whatnot. Well, owning an expensive NFT can be just like that. It's your identity online, and especially younger generations get this, and it's important to them. And the other side of the coin, I guess, is the belonging to a community, because if you spend a lot of time online, be it games or communities, whatever, you're going to want to belong to some community. And the kind of NFT that you identify with, that you have as a profile picture, will kind of show the world which community you belong to, which is important to some of us. You know, like some people who drive Alfa Romeos wave to each other on the freeway. I don't know why, but they do. It's kind of the same thing here, right? So that's kind of one of the softer values that NFTs bring. Now, something I call the digital twin spillover effect, meaning that what we're starting to see is that companies are creating physical objects and creating a digital twin of them and minting it as NFTs. So you have something that you can use in the real world, and you can actually use that when you're in the virtual world as well, a digital twin of it. Now, there's a spillover effect, right? Because if it acquires or somehow attains value in the real world, it'll spill over into the digital world and vice versa. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. I know big companies like Nike are spending a lot of energy, pouring a lot of energy into this thing, exactly. And now for the sixth metric of value, which is basically the most interesting, and digital twins are an example of that. Basically, what utility are you going to build into your NFT? An NFT is just code, basically. So it's only your imagination that limits you. So what kind of utility can you build into your NFT? So if you think of NFTs as just profile pictures, of course you're not going to see the big value here. But if you think about what kind of added value you can give to the users. For instance, I've written here token-gated commerce, which basically means that you're seeing now in some web shops, you can only gain access to certain products or at certain price levels if you hold a specific token. If you go to a conference, there's stuff you can only do if you have a specific token. There are actually conferences that you can only attend if you have a specific NFT. And we've only scratched the surface of what kind of utility we can build into NFTs. And that's what gets me really excited about it. And I think the last one I'll mention is just the combinatory effects. So if you have one NFT, maybe you can't really do anything with it. But if you combine it with another specific NFT, then you can actually do something with it. It's something that's just starting to emerge now, where you can actually gain access to something if you have two different NFTs, and two people who hold those NFTs can get together and gain access to something. And I think that's also a lot of opportunity waiting there for us. Right, so that was something about why NFTs are and can be valuable. Now, I think it's important to state that a lot of people think if you own an NFT, you own the IP, and you actually don't. You don't own the copyright, you don't own anything, unless it's stated in the smart contract. And even if it is, maybe you don't actually. So that is a perfect segue, I think, to talk about if there are problems with NFTs. And yes, there sure are a lot of problems to be solved. And I hope this talk maybe can inspire those of you who are developers to work on these problems. So the first one is what I just talked about. IP rights it's still the Wild West. We need some kind of legislation around NFTs so people actually know what they own and they don't have to be law school students to interpret what they actually own when they buy an NFT. Then, like I said, the underlying asset actually is on a server somewhere, and the owner of that server could theoretically change or remove that asset. That's a problem to be solved or to be mitigated somehow. Someone else could mint the same asset as you have on another blockchain, and that happens. It's not a huge problem, but it's still a hassle. You can always document if you're the first one to own it, but it's a hassle, something that needs to be solved. Then I heard about this one, that you can actually airdrop an NFT or whatever into someone's wallet if you have the address. And there are stories of malware being airdropped into people's wallets. Whether or not that can actually grant them access to your wallet, I don't know. I haven't seen proof of that, but that's another thing to be concerned about. So if you want to dive deeper into the concerns surrounding NFTs, you should watch this YouTube video. It's by Dan Olsen. It's called Line Goes Up, the problem with NFTs. It's 2 hours plus of just ranting about how hopeless blockchains and NFTs are. But I think it's worth a watch because Dan has a lot of valid points and a lot of valid concerns that I think need to be addressed. I do think, though, that he commits a classic mistake, that he wants to judge technology based on a very nascent stage it's in. It's kind of like judging the automobile industry from the first few car models that ever existed. And that's kind of where he's at. But do watch it if you're interested in some of the challenges out there. Now we are deep in a bear market. So now developers, they kind of have the peace inquired to actually develop stuff, to build cool stuff instead of being rushed along on all the hype that's been going on in the previous bull market. So so that's a good thing, actually, that things have calmed down. Okay, so when thinking about what NFTs could be tomorrow, I think historically science fiction has inspired, maybe even predetermined, the development of the world. So what better place to look if we want to know what can NFTs actually be in the future? So I'm going to tell you the story of a Web3 native, seen through a Web3 native's eyes, about how it is growing up within the world of Web3 and where it might lead. And I'm actually going to read it because otherwise I can't remember it. Right. Let's jump in. Meet Alex. She is 16 years old and lives with her parents in a small town far from any major city. Alex feels like a stranger in her community. She hates being put in any kind of box, especially the gender box. At age 11, her parents finally accepted that she wasn't going to play ball with the other kids, so they let her roam free, the only place that she ever seemed to belong or find any joy, online. That's when Alex discovered that she wasn't alone at all. The world of gaming freed her to play with her identity both in-game and when engaging with her guilds on forums. This is Alex's identity online, androgen, though no one knows that she's behind it, and she does all she can to keep it that way. She discovers that being non-binary is just right and tries on the pronouns they, them for size in real life, or the legacy system, as she likes to call it. It does not go over well with her parents, and the fact that she spends most of her waking life online brings them close to an intervention. She creates the identity Miko5 to appease them, and also to keep androgen from getting doxxed. Now, just like Vitalik Buterin created Ethereum because World of Warcraft moderators modified one of his in-game characters, Alex grows increasingly frustrated about not actually owning her avatar or being able to use it in the games that make up much of her life. So in early 2017, she gets in on Bitcoin and Ethereum to own something not at the mercy of a government or a large corporation. This leads her down a path paved with promising altcoins like Monero, luring her with its privacy promises. In 2018, Androgen discovers the play-to-earn NFT-based game Axie Infinity, where players battle, breed, collect, raise, and build kingdoms for their Axies, which are cute little Tamagotchi-like creatures. Players can buy, sell, and trade all assets using the native token SLP, which can be traded for fiat currency like US dollars. Especially poor Philippines discover that they can make a living playing Axie Infinity. But soon the entry price reaches $1,000, meaning that poor people can no longer afford to join. So first world citizens start to lease out Axies to Philippines, who toil many hours a day to give away a sizable cut of their profits. #digital colonialism. Now, the many days and nights spent on Discord lead to a number of airdrops of both NFTs and tokens. Within 3 years of getting into crypto, culminating with some luck and cunning during DeFi summer, Alex finds herself worth more on paper than her parents make in 10 years. She moves in to her own apartment in the city, ecstatic to get away from her parents' nagging, though somewhat concerned about legacy system necessities like cooking, cleaning, and doing the laundry. She soon finds herself desperately hoping for someone to invent a laundry robot that doesn't rinse and tell. She starts using the pronouns they, them in their few reluctant in-the-flesh interactions. Alex falls in love with the metaverse, the sandbox, a virtual land/game with a Minecraft look and feel. Alex starts to purchase land as NFTs and becomes a de facto architect/real estate agent as they develop attractive plots of land and lease them to companies that are hunting for the best placement and cool venues to host events. By now you might start to think that Alex cares most about getting rich, but then you'd be mistaken. Okay, maybe they did get carried away for a while, but back on track, Alex starts to invest in small creators by buying their NFTs. They support builders pushing the decentralization agenda, ensuring that many more creators can make a decent living pursuing their passion, instead of the lion's share going to middlemen. Many of the NFTs Alex buys grants them access to the creators. Some encounters lead to close friendships and collaborations, and they inspire Alex to build a creators cafe in the sandbox, where people help each other build a society of creators rather than consumers. Like many owners of famous NFTs, Alex starts to license them out for creative use in books and movies. Tapping into a growing trend, Alex often donates the profits to the original creator. Right, so we're up to the present day. Now let's look in the crystal ball. Though Alex is happy spending most waking hours in metaverses and games, they can't shake the feeling of simply living in a multitude of smaller semi-walled gardens. So they are thrilled when the interoperability dream starts to become reality, allowing users to move assets in a frictionless manner between metaverses and actually use them, like bringing a weapon from the first AAA game Illuvium into CSGO 3.0. Yes, they finally got around to embracing Web 3.0. Now, Alex loves the fact that the consequence of using an item from another metaverse isn't pre-programmed, but rather emergent. You see, post-2023, NFTs are equipped with something akin to DNA, which allow for emerging properties on interaction. So combining NFTs from two different ecosystems and watching them evolve unpredictably is fast becoming popular, like two game characters merging to create a whole new kind of creature, or a useless blob of Web3 ectoplasm. Like kids used to watch YouTube videos of other kids playing games, can you imagine? People today lose themselves experiencing the memories of other people. Memories sold as NFTs. This has taken off after a neural interface became accessible to the masses, feeding sensory stimuli directly into the sensory apparatus. But memories aren't created equal, and neither are ways of experiencing them. Alex joins a Storyverse crew that specializes in tuning sensory parameters and in some cases even prescribing physical adjustments to optimize an experience. The craziest ones recommending doses and timing of XMDMA. Allegedly awesome. Something weird is going on. Alex has sensed it for a while. They feel a strange pull towards some NFTs, like a physical attraction in the legacy system. and outright repulsion towards other NFTs. Stranger still, whenever they follow the pull and interact with an NFT, the sum becomes greater than the parts. And vice versa. Defying repulsion leads to bad outcomes. Alex isn't the only one feeling it. More and more people start to obey the impulses, and the results are positive. Poverty decreases, beautiful new relationships form, equality increases along with general well-being and contentment. Rumors spread about a non-sentient intelligence nicknamed Cupid 4.0, pulling strings, a being emerged on the wings of the interoperability and composability of Web 3.0. This causes a backlash, of course. People obsessing over free will, they rebel, but always to their detriment. Eventually, everyone accepts that life is better when Cupid 4.0 runs the show. Are we sheep to do so? Guess we'll never know. Guess we'll never care again. All right, enough of story hour. I want to round this talk off by returning to the original question. So, are NFTs just a pyramid scheme? I think you can guess now that I think they aren't just that. A lot of NFT projects out there are for sure pyramid schemes, but I just think there are too many Web3 builders today who aren't the pick of the litter, right? We have some of the people who pioneered the internet itself are working in the Web3 space today. I hear about a lot of developers who actually just put down what they're working on to join the Web3 movement. And all the major institutions are looking to get in as well when their ESG boards will allow them to. I also think, and maybe this is hopium, but I think that the ideas behind are too powerful. So maybe they won't be called NFTs at all, but I think the basic ideas will prevail. So I hope that decentralization actually happens. I think that's what we need right now. Immutable proof of ownership is something that we really need. And interoperability is something that we really need. So I think those ideas are too powerful and too pressing on people's minds right now for this whole NFT thing to just go away. And finally, I think the prospect of a creator world over a consumer world is one worth pursuing. Now, I think what will be the gateway drug to get this all underway is going to be gaming. Gamers are used to buying assets online. They're used to spending a lot of their time online. So I think that's kind of going to be the vehicle that gets us to mass adoption of a lot of the things that the NFT world holds. If you have any questions or comments afterwards, feel free to reach out to me on that address. I think I'll just round off the talk by saying that Hodl on, we all gonna make it. Thank you.